Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Collaborative Innovation Webinar Series presented by Business Innovation Brief in partnership with Innovation Enterprise. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Rocket Space, for presenting this webinar series and helping us to make this happen. If you haven't heard of Rocket Space, they're helping some of the largest corporations around the world expand their innovation pipeline through startup partnerships and collaborative industry accelerator programs. For registrants of this webinar series, Rocket Space will provide a free copy of their disruption report that includes the top trends of 2017 and startups within the following tech themes: communication, customer experience, connectivity and IoT, and mobility and transportation. Thanks again to Rocket Space. My name is Chris Bechtel, and I will be your host for today's webinar. If you are joining us and have just a couple of quick housekeeping notes as we get started here, we are recording this webinar, and we will send all of you a link to the recording along with the slides. So in case you miss anything, want to review or share with a colleague or two, please look out for that email, which we'll send to you in the next couple of days following this webinar. Also, if you do have any audio issues, sometimes it helps to switch to dial in by phone. So if you're using the web interface of the webinar platform, you can choose More in the upper right corner of your screen and then switch to phone. Sometimes that eliminates any sort of the voice over IP type of issues. Also, you'll see if you do log into the webinar platform, the chat on the left. So we will hold about 10 minutes at the end of the presentation today for questions. So please feel free to type questions, directly to the presenters, to myself and to Jeffrey. We will capture as many of those questions as we can and get to as many as we can during the Q&A section. Again, this is a series of webinars. This is the fourth in our series of 6, so please do look out for the next upcoming webinars in May. We have 2 more great presentations coming up, so do please look out for those, and we look forward to having you attend those as well. Today's speaker is Jeffrey Phillips, who is the VP of Marketing for OVO. And Jeffrey is a senior consultant and leads the consulting practice. He is also responsible for thought leadership, project assignments, and business development. Jeffrey has led innovation projects in the U.S., Western Europe, South Africa, Latin America, Malaysia, Dubai, and Turkey, as experience in the entire front end of innovation, with specific focus on trend spotting and scenario planning, obtaining customer insights, defining an innovation process, as well as open innovation. He is the author of 3 books about innovation: Relentless Innovation, 20 Mistakes Innovators Make, and Make Us More Innovative. He also writes the Innovative on Purpose blog, which ranks as one of the top blogs about innovation. I'm pleased to have Jeffrey with us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the introduction. And if we could, I'd like to start out by giving a quick poll. Chris, if you would mind popping that poll up. And the purpose of the poll is just to get a real quick sense of where people stand in terms of their knowledge of open innovation so that we can pace the presentation appropriately. If you'd just take a couple quick votes there, it'd be helpful. Looks like everybody's voting. And we've got a mix of people and a mix of experiences, which is great. Okay, that's probably fine, Chris. Looks like we got about 50% of the folks have some experience. About maybe a third have little to none, and a smaller percentage have a lot of experience. So it's a good blend of different kinds of experience with open innovation. Thanks, Chris. If you would remove the poll, I'd appreciate it.
Yep, all set. And you may have to just click close poll on your end if you want to get it to hide away from that presentation. Perfect.
I did that. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm going to do a presentation that basically looks at open innovation, and we're going to build to a larger idea We're going to try to encompass both the ideas of where open innovation and innovation without that modifier of open, where things are today. And I'm also going to try to talk some about where we believe the innovation and open innovation world is going. Along the way, as Chris has said, if you'd like to plug in some questions, I may be able to respond to them in real time. I won't promise that, but I will try to pay attention to them. In the meantime, I'm going to give you a really quick overview of OVO. Chris has already done a little bit of that, not trying to make an advertisement, but want you to understand sort of our background. I do want to talk about both what we talk about as closed and open innovation, and then I want to start getting deeper into types and methods of innovation, of open innovation, and then spend the majority of the, probably the final third of the presentation just talking about where we believe open innovation is heading. And I'm going to be using a presentation in some cases where there are a lot of images, because the images and photos and those kinds of things tend to convey the message a little bit more appropriately sometimes. So if anything's unclear, just let me know. As Chris said, we are a consulting firm. We tend to work with larger distributed organizations, typically Fortune 500, either in the U.S. or overseas. Our goal is to help embed innovation as an operating methodology, a core capability in an organization wrapped around what we call trained and engaged advocates. That means we're trying to pass information and knowledge to our client while we're working with them on an innovation activity. Generally, we believe innovation, whether it's open innovation or innovation itself, is a transferable capability. We don't limit ourselves to a particular industry. In fact, we find moving between industries helps us learn. So you'll see we've got a range of customers from a range of different industries in a range of geographies highlighted. These are just what we'll call the license plate slide. We also believe very much in exposing what we learn and what we think to the marketplace. So I do author a blog, as Chris talked about, the Innovate on Purpose blog. You're welcome to check that out. It's been ranked as one of the best blogs in innovation over the last, I think, 7 to 10 years. A couple of books on innovation. You're welcome to check those out. And we do publish a lot of our white papers as well. So that basically is the advertisement, and we'll move on. What I wanted to do today is to talk a lot about best practices generally first, and then sort of build our way to open innovation, and then build from that to where's open innovation going. And if you are a student of innovation, you'll know a couple of things. There are some best practices, and those were passed down to us from people like Alex Osborne, Sidney Parnes, and others. And there are a few things that are really best practices. One is that you want to get a lot of ideas, you want to use diverse teams, you want to combine ideas and explore and discover. So I'd like to talk about each of these very quickly and put them in the context of first of innovation and then also of open innovation. So Linus Pauling, who is one of the greatest chemists to ever live, said the best way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. If you think about innovation in the context of your organization in a small team, it's rare to find a team that will really generate a lot of ideas. One of the rationales for then thinking about open innovation is it may be more effective, it may be more creative to open up the idea generation to more, not only more people, but more organizations, so you can drive out more ideas. It does lead to a winnowing process, but most of the time, one of the best practices is to have a lot of ideas. Second one is to create a diverse, heterogeneous team. And again, in a lot of organizations, we tend to hire people who look a lot like us or think a lot like us. And this is another rationale for open innovation, because the more integration you have, the more relationships you have with different kinds of people, the more culturally diverse thinking happens, the more likely you are to have new and unusual or new and radically interesting ideas. So again, another one of these best practices of thinking about homogeneous versus heterogeneous teams. Homogeneous teams are quick to work together, but often are very siloed. There's heterogeneous teams, and what I mean here is you can do heterogeneous within your organization, but you can also do that in a broader way outside of your organization by pulling together different players from different organizations, leading to open innovation. Now, there are some challenges with that, and we'll talk about that later. One of the other things that we know is true is that, and I love this thing from Picasso, is that great artists steal. If we only hunker down inside the four walls of our organization and do internal innovation, we may never look beyond and understand what's happening in the outside world. We need to be able not only to borrow and copy, but to steal from the outside world. And sometimes that may sound a little negative in terms of the language, but the faster we are at finding and adopting and copying or borrowing, or in the case of a legal corporation, perhaps licensing that technology from the outside, or that great idea, or that great intellectual property from the outside, the better off we're going to be. So I wanted to talk very quickly about the light bulb. Everybody knows the light bulb story, right? How Edison created the light bulb. This is one of the example of one of the earliest light bulbs. But I wanted to talk more importantly about what was going on at the time of Edison's work. Because Edison didn't create the light bulb, he created the filament and then put it in a bulb and then put it in a base and then put it in a socket. If you think about all the innovation that was happening at that time, not only was there innovation happening on every one of those components, but it was happening in a lot of different media. For example, there were people exploring bamboo, cotton, cardboard, wood, platinum, and other things just in the filament alone. And Edison wasn't the only one doing it. The point here is that there's a lot of innovation going on simultaneously. And a lot of times in our internal teams, we forget that. How much is going on outside in the world around us? And can we harvest and create and bring that in? So you also have the interesting story of AC current versus DC. Edison was very sold on DC, so he was very much sold out on one particular type of delivery mechanism. Meanwhile, there was a lot of other development going on, and eventually we know in many places that AC took over, and I may have gotten that story backwards. But you understand the point I'm making here, that there's a lot of activity going on, and a lot of times we tend to ignore that or think we're in our own bubble, and we have insights that other people don't. All of these kinds of ideas are going to lead us to this concept that Menlo Park, and the way Edison worked, we often think of him as a lonely genius, but his work should flavor the way we work. He was bringing together a lot of different kinds of technologies, a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different kinds of industries together to create his solutions. So when we talk about Menlo Park and Edison, we're really talking about open innovation back then. They didn't call it that back then, but that's what it was. Even something I like to think of as the Hadron Collider is a representation of open innovation, because what you have in this case are actual universities, research organizations, and even governments working together, using new technologies to do something else that's interesting in an open innovation, but less talked about, and that is exploration and discovery. In some cases, we need more exploration and discovery, and it's hard to do that individually because of either the cost structures or just the breadth of the technologies that are involved. So this is another example of an open innovation activity shared by a lot of different kinds of relationships and partnerships, but for a very different purpose. So if you boil it all back down and you go back to the best practices I was talking about, let's put those back into context for a second. We said you need a lot of ideas. And we said you need a lot of diverse perspectives and viewpoints. And we said often you need a lot of different kinds of intellectual property and technologies. And the best innovation is going to come from the collisions of those kinds of things. So the question we need to begin to ask ourselves is, can we really do all that internally? Or perhaps the next question we should say is, will we be successful, and do we have all the ingredients? And do we have all the knowledge and all the ideas and all the intellectual property internally? Or can I really accelerate innovation by going out and tapping into ideas, intellectual property, and technology available in the global marketplace? This is a really interesting question, and it's probably one that you can probably already guess where I'm heading. But the person who answered this question, I think, most definitively was this gentleman. This is Arthur Lafley. At a time when he became the CEO of P&G, P&G had the largest R&D department, in other words, more research underway in the consumer goods package space than just about any firm on the planet. And in that time, he said, we want 50% of our ideas to come from outside of our organization, because although we have one of the largest R&D teams, we don't possibly understand all the ideas, all the technologies, and all the compounds that are out in the world. So if the company that had one of the deepest R&D teams and was a leader in its space, and this was well over a decade ago, decided to go out and do open innovation because they didn't have all those ideas and perspectives and technologies that we just talked about, then you can pretty much assume that most companies are in that same boat, that they need more ideas and technologies and perspectives to come into them. And this is, many of you may have seen this next slide, but I like it because it's very inclusive of all the different kinds of relationships that were necessary for P&G to start its open innovation approach. And so you'll see a lot of different organizations there. Now, what they're not talking about is how they did that, but they are beginning to identify all the different relationships and all the different organizations and people they needed to interact with in order to get those ideas and perspectives and intellectual property, and to begin the collisions that were necessary to find the best ideas. So I've sort of set it up that it's almost inevitable that you're going to do open innovation. In fact, most of you probably already are in some form or fashion. And increasingly, we believe that we're going to drop the word open and just call it innovation. Because we have to get faster, we have to get smarter, we have to have more of these relationships in order to innovate at the pace at which we need to innovate. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference, and I'm just going to very quickly run through this open versus closed. I know that most of you are familiar with it, but I like to work from a solid foundation. Closed innovation for us means basically that you're going to work completely entirely. And you've seen these two graphics before probably, with a funnel representing innovation, saying, well, our internal ideas will go through a funnel and be passed on by us as new products and services. Whereas on the right, you start moving into what Henry Chesborough started the idea of open innovation, whereas internal and external ideas go through the funnel. Some spin in the funnel, some may spin out of the funnel, and some may go off into become new businesses and so forth. So as we think about this, the closed innovation model is the one we most often adhere to. And I'll define closed innovation as activities that require only internal people, only internal ideas, and only internal innovation capabilities. So we're not using external participation, we're not using external IP. And that's traditional innovation that you think of in the funnel, and you think of as, generally people think of it as, well, that's a brainstorming activity. And I'll get 4 or 5 of my folks together and we'll brainstorm. Now, we've talked about the challenges before about this. Do you have the wealth and diversity of ideas? Do you have the wealth and diversity in heterogeneous teams? Do you have the wealth and access to the kinds of intellectual property and technologies you're going to need in order to compete? Generally, the answer is probably no, but that doesn't mean that internal innovation is always wrong. Sometimes you'll find that it's faster to conduct an internal innovation activity. You don't have to worry about intellectual property ownership. Who owns the ideas? Well, if our team did it, and our team did it internally with no outside participation, we're more likely to be able to claim ownership of those things. Generally, you're going to find that it's more incremental change and not nearly as compelling to the marketplace. On the other side, though, the disadvantages are that if you introduce some of these new perspectives, your idea scope is constrained, and oftentimes you'll find that you just have blind spots in your thinking and your approaches. So let's compare that with open innovation. So simply, for our perspectives, open innovation is an umbrella term. It turns out that open innovation is just an approach with a whole lot of subsets of techniques and methods underneath it. Really what we're doing is searching for, finding, acquiring, and implementing, and we like to define 3 things. Ideas, ideas, intellectual property, technologies, or products. And any one of those things may be things that we acquire and bring in or spin into our company. And in some cases, we may spin them out. We may create ideas that we say don't have a logical home for us, but have a logical home for someone else. So with this definition, then, we can begin to go back into history and say that the gentleman who coined this phrase, and who's probably one of the godfathers around it, is a gentleman named Henry Chesborough, who wrote the first book around open innovation. And from that standpoint, then, this is work that OVO has done, we then divided that into innovation types. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different types throughout the rest of the presentation and kind of give you some context. But some of those different types of open innovation are things like technology scouting. So going out and looking for specific technologies that I need, either in other organizations, research institutes, academic institutes, those kinds of things. Who has technology I need and how can I find it? And on the far right there, you'll find a list of partners that we've identified that can assist with this. So you don't always have to do this work alone. There are partners that line up with just about every one of these kinds of techniques. You'll see a contest. Probably one of the most famous contests was the BP oil spill. So when British Petroleum's well blew up in the Gulf of Mexico, they put a contest up, and they said anyone who wants to can submit ideas about how to extract oil out of the seawater. And they had thousands of people submit, and that was a specific contest. Blind RFPs, some of you may be familiar with firms like Nine Sigma or Innocentive, and we've had many clients use both those platforms, and the client will ask for a specific technical capability, blinded. In other words, the people responding to it don't know who requested it, and responders can say, well, I know how to solve that problem, or I have that technology, and then these firms put together a marriage. Crowdsourcing is another type of open innovation. If you've ever seen Dell's IdeaStorm site, that's a place where anyone can go and submit ideas to Dell. It's really free form and wide open, and they've received thousands and thousands of ideas. Vetted partnerships is another type of open innovation. It's probably one of the best in a large corporate setting, because what you're starting to do is build trusted relationships with partners, and that's really where the P&G Connect and Develop platform lies. Sponsored research is another kind of open innovation. And the last one that some of our clients have used relatively well are what we'll call brokers or key opinion leaders. So identifying people who are leaders in a particular field and using them to help broker relationships or broker insights between people who have technology and people who are seeking technology. So these are some of the different kinds of open innovation types or methodologies that we've seen and we've used with different clients. Now, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages in open innovation? The advantages of open innovation are the plethora of types of ideas, intellectual property, and technologies to choose from, and tapping into a much broader array of expertise. The downside, and some of the biggest ones are, and I'm going to talk about these in the end of the presentation especially, is that one, anytime you do open innovation, you're at risk of exposing your goals, your needs, or your strategic direction to third parties. And I'll explain where that happened to us with one of our clients. The second is that oftentimes internal innovation appears to be free or costless, whereas many times with open innovation, ideas or technologies are going to come at a cost. And the third one is the intellectual ownership. Who owns this IP and who's placing value on it often becomes a real challenge unless it's thought through in advance. So what I want to do now is begin to talk about a shift. I've kind of introduced the idea of internal closed innovation, and I want to start talking about where the world is going. Because as you look at this slide, this is a slide we use a lot to talk to our clients about where the world is going from an innovation perspective. It started out with an individual. We had a smart R&D guy or a smart marketing gal who had some real great insight, and we leveraged that to create innovation. And then as innovation matured in the organization, we wrapped teams around those people. So we have innovation teams and innovation processes. And many of you may be right here now saying, well, we have some smart folks on a team, but we're still doing everything internally. And then there's this gap before you move over into open innovation. A lot of companies will say, well, we want our innovation team to go work with one partner, one vetted relationship, one university. So that's that first toe in the water, which is really about a partnering, what we'll call partnering or business development relationship. And that final maturation process is going to be working simultaneously with multiple different kinds of partners, universities, inventors, entrepreneurs, and companies, in becoming much more of an assessment or licensing model all the time, much more continuous. So you're moving from sort of discontinuous to more continuous, few partners to many partners. And this is the way the world's moving, and this is the way your innovation model will eventually need to move as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is spend a little bit of time looking at some different methodologies or ways to think about open innovation that may help you choose some of the tools I talked about earlier. This slide's one I'm going to come back to in a minute, but what we've done here is take a traditional funnel, and instead of ideas flowing in and products flowing out, we're thinking about the maturation of ideas as they move through a funnel. So we have opportunities, we have ideas, we have technologies, and we have products. And the yellow box represents activities within the company, so there's still internal innovation going on. And outside that dotted line, those are people or relationships or activities that happen outside the company. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit about this larger sort of view of these relationships in a minute. Now, if any of you sat in on one of the earlier presentations around open innovation, this is a framework that OVO put together about 10 years ago that was then published in a book called Open Innovation and Crowdsourcing. One of the ways that we taught our customers to think about open innovation was to think about it in two dimensions. On the y-axis is the question of what instructions do you want to give to your participants? Do I want to tell them an awful lot of things about what I want, or do I want to tell them relatively little? If you think back to the relatively little, that would be more like a contest. Hey, I need to solve an oil problem, but I don't want to tell you much else. If it's more directed, it may be, hey, I need a specific kind of chemical compound that can reside on a stainless steel framework. That's a directed instruction. So you want to first think about how much communication or instruction do I want to give the participants. And on the x-axis then, the question becomes, who do I want to invite? Do I want to invite relatively few knowledgeable people? Or would I like to invite basically everyone or somewhere in between? And in a few seconds, I'll show you how some of those tools map to this kind of a framework. This kind of framework is really meant to ask you, what's your relationship and how do you want to interact with the sets of partners that you have? How much do you want to expose from the instruction point of view? And how many people do you want to expose the idea or the need to? Now, there are other models. In fact, there's one that was published not too long ago, and I'll talk about in a second. This, if you take that framework I just gave you and you use the tools I talked about earlier, I can begin to put the tools on this framework. So, for example, if I only want to invite a few people, but I'm not interested in giving them a lot of instruction, I might be talking about sponsored research. Because what I'm really asking that university to do is to be as creative as they can within certain boundaries, but I want all the thinking that they're going to get. But if I want that, say, co-developed or relationship or vetted partner relationship, then I want to give much more instructions to very few organizations. On the other hand, if you go in the right corner there, I'm going to invite everybody to my to Dell's IdeaStorm site, and I'm not going to give them any instructions because I'm just interested to see what customers think they want, and I'm interested in as many different opinions as possible. So I can point out here that these different techniques lead to different kinds of exposure of your thinking or where you're headed or your product strategy. And it also gives up control to a certain extent as well. Dell will tell you, for example, that 99.9% of all the ideas they receive don't add any value for them because they're not providing any instruction. I just got to ask a question. How does one control how broad you go with crowdsourcing without losing the flow of your innovation process? You won't lose control of the flow of your innovation process. What you can lose control of or what you can unintentionally share is the direction your company is headed in this particular innovation activity. Based on the kinds of questions you ask and the kinds of things you're trying to get from the crowd, you may signal particular kinds of things that you're looking for, and that may signal to a smart observer where you're headed with a new product or service. That's why crowdsourcing or other kinds of models can be a bit risky. Crowdsourcing is especially can be a little bit problematic too because you often don't give many instructions, so you're getting lots and lots of ideas that often aren't all that valuable. Sometimes it's better to move toward a contest where you state a particular goal and maybe even toward more co-developed where you may even provide instructions. Again, each need is different. Categorized another way, this is another model that I liked, but it changes the game because it asks how difficult is the knowledge to obtain? that I need. So if there's knowledge out there that I don't have that I need, is it hard to get or is it easy to get? And then the other axis asks, how complex is the problem I'm trying to solve? So if the problem has high complexity and the information isn't all hidden, I might develop partnerships. On the other hand, I might move into a community type of interaction if the information is hidden and it's also a very problematic problem to solve. This framework asks the question around how difficult is it to get the knowledge and how difficult is the problem I'm trying to solve. So it doesn't really solve the question or address the question the early framework used around how do I want to interact with my partners. This one's really about the question of how difficult is the information. So we had a question which says, we're a small company with cutting-edge products and services. How do we reach out to larger companies who are open to innovation? What is most appropriate? I'll try to answer that a little bit. It comes down to, the question you've asked comes down to a certain extent to the industry you're in. Because depending on the industry, some industries are much more open to relationships and co-developing and trusted partnerships, and some aren't. So it would depend on the industry to a certain extent, and also some of the kinds of products. But we'll come back to it. I see your answer, and I'll try to catch you in the QA. The final model I wanted to just introduce you to is one called Want, Find, Get, Manage. The gentleman on the right there is Gene Slowinski, and he came up with there is a full open innovation methodology that is really his model that goes into asking the question, what do I want in terms of going out and getting technologies or products? How do I find it? How do I get it? In other words, how do I negotiate for it? How do I acquire it and bring it into my organization? And then finally, how do I manage it? I'm not here necessarily to advocate his model. It's a larger methodology around open innovation, but I do think it's purposeful for you to understand that it's out there. So what I've done so far, very quickly, I realize I'm going fairly rapidly, is to try to establish a framework or a foundation for what is innovation, what is open innovation, and then some of the different styles and types within open innovation. Now, if you're with me, then you'll understand that right now I really believe that we're going to be dropping the open innovation moniker to just talk about innovation pretty soon. And what I want to do is spend the rest of my time with you in the presentation model just talking about what's coming next. So this is the model in one of the bazaars in Turkey, and I think this is probably one of the best examples of where open innovation is heading, in that many of us will enter, many companies and many organizations will enter a marketplace, and it will be an innovation bazaar. We will find people, we will gather people, and we will gather ideas and technologies from a large array of different kinds of organizations to solve our needs, and then everyone will go back to their business. So I think it's going to be much more interactive and much more on the fly, but there are some underlying rules with that. So I told you we'd be coming back to two slides that I wanted to talk about. In this, we have taken the traditional funnel, and we've said there are opportunities, ideas, technologies, and products, and we've said there are things that happen inside the organization and outside the organization. In this model, then, there are 5 participants that you might want to think about. Experts, universities, sorry, there's a spelling problem there, customers, trusted partners, and inventors. And there may be more, but these are 5 good models to think about. And each one of these can help with one or more of the different segments of the funnel. So I may have customers who can tell me, hey, there are these needs I have or these opportunities I have, or customers who tell me I have these ideas that I'd like to share with you. There may be universities that have ideas or patents, so ideas and technologies that come in. So the idea here is that at different points in the funnel, depending on where you are in this particular funnel, you may be working with different kinds of marketplace participants. So one of the things you want to do is begin to identify who are the appropriate participants and where do they fit within your particular funnel. And think about the funnel not just as ideas and not just as technologies, but as opportunities, ideas, technologies, and products. So the other way to look at this same model a little bit differently, the same funnel a little bit differently, is then to ask, okay, if those are the relationships I could have, what are some of the different kinds of channels or interactions I can use to get to those partners? So you'll see that we've talked about a few of these. Down at the bottom in the pink, you've got external RFPs, like with Innocentive. We've talked about technology scouting, a way of going out and finding that. And you can do technology scouting yourself, or you can trust a partner to do that. You can do external RFPs, or you can trust a partner to do that. There are a number of different kinds of channels or mechanisms to go out into the world and interact with those same partners that I defined around the previous slide. So the previous slide was about, see if I can go back. Yeah, the previous slide is about relationships and where they may fit within the segments of the funnel. The following slide is about tools and mechanisms that I can use to interact with those folks when I'm in those different interactions. And they're going to change depending on the kind of partner and the kind of technology and the kind of strategic approach or intent that I have for finding an idea versus finding a technology. So what I want to do now is spend a little bit of time on lessons learned. I told you earlier that one of the things we found is that open innovation exposes the issue of exposing your strategy. We worked with a customer who used Innocentive, and we put together a request for a particular technology. And it turned out that one day a marketing person came over to our team and said, I just found something. Somebody's looking for technology exactly like us. And we said, well, where'd you find it? And they said, well, we found it on Innocentive. We said, well, that's us. That we're looking for that technology. And the statement was, no other company would be seeking this. That's why I knew it was us. And we thought that we had communicated to everyone in the organization who needed to know that we were pursuing this. This gentleman came in basically in horror that this was happening when everyone else was really happy that we were using the Innocentive approach. So there's a lot of expectation setting around what are we going to give away or what could we give away by using an open innovation approach. Second lesson learned, you can't build a partnership on the fly. So in another customer, we were dealing with some university research. We knew several universities that had research that we were interested in, but we had never built relationships with them. So trying to build those relationships as we needed the technology was exceptionally difficult because there were already people in other organizations interested in that technology as well who had deeper relationships than we did. So what you'll have to start doing is deciding which partnerships seem valuable and important to us, and how do I begin to build, if not the entire bridge, at least the scaffolding to those relationships, so that when I need to exercise them or as I need to exercise them, I don't have to build the entire bridge at the moment I need it. And this isn't easy because you may have lots of different relationships, but as you begin to decide which tools and methods you want, the bridges and partnerships that you need to build will become more evident. And having built one or two, you'll be much better at building them again. Last lesson learned I'm going to talk about here is the ability to understand what IP is worth. Everyone believes their IP is worth more than you do, and everyone thinks that they should pay less for IP than the seller does. So one of the big challenges that we've run into is in two regards. One, if you have an intellectual property team, they may not be all that familiar with negotiating for intellectual property. They may be able to say what it is and whether or not they should patent it, but they may not have a lot of experience trying to price it. And most customers and people that you'll work with who are interested in licensing IP generally overvalue intellectual property, and this is always the case with, well, I shouldn't say always, but the majority of the time it's the case with the universities, that they overvalue the intellectual property they've created when it comes to licensing. So this is another example of being able to say, well, here's what we believe the IP is worth, and here's why. Here's how many other steps we'll have to take, and here's the market challenges and conditions that product will still have to face before we can commercialize it. So it's not merely a question of setting a price and negotiating a price. Many times it's being able to demonstrate why that price is valuable and meaningful. Okay, very quickly we're going to go into where we're going in the future. So some of what I've tried to do is give you a sense of who you might interact with and some of the channels you might use. And what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about where we think innovation and open innovation is going. So there's a couple things I want to talk about. First of all is the idea of no distinctions. You'll notice in the title slide here I have the word open in brackets. And that's because increasingly we believe that there really won't be open innovation. We're just going to call it innovation, because increasingly more and more of what we'll do will rely and integrate more and more with third parties, and we'll do less and less purely internal innovation except for incremental new product enhancements or things along those lines. But the more interesting, the more creative your ideas are, the more external and open innovation you're going to do. So the whole point of this joke is that we have done so much internal innovation, so many brainstorming teams, that it's hard to break out of that model. But what you're going to see is increasingly, very rapidly, you're going to see a lot of companies start engaging much more competently in open innovation, and closed innovation is still going to be really important, but it's going to become less and less of an item. And I apologize, my system is kicking me off the presenter model. So I apologize. I'll have to just buy a second here until I can log back in. Next slide then is this is a classic slide from the folks at Doblin. And if you're not familiar with it, you should be, because basically this is known as the 10 types of innovation model. And one of the things you're going to find out very quickly is that open innovation, for the most part, has been, and you've even heard me say it, it's been about products and technologies and intellectual property. Those things all basically fall into product and product system, the two orange things in the middle, products and technologies. What you're going to see pretty rapidly is that open innovation is going to open up in the same way that other innovation has, and its outcomes are going to broaden into things like services, channels, experiences, and business models. And if regular innovation follows that path, and it is following that path, then open innovation is going to follow that path. And we're going to see much more of a flowering of open innovation outcomes that are things other than products. They are processes, they are business models, they are networks, they are customer experiences. So that's going to happen. It's going to happen very quickly in the open innovation space. And it's going to be both required because there's so much business change and agility, and it's also going to create business change and agility. This is one of these self-reinforcing things that's going to happen, that either you're going to get faster, smarter, and more agile and do open innovation, and then it's going to make you smarter, faster, and more agile, or you're really going to struggle. So this is sort of a reinforcing loop of the speed and agility that you'll need in order to be able to do open innovation effectively. One of the last areas I'll talk about is this idea of platforms and ecosystems. If you're not familiar with it, I write another blog with a gentleman named Paul Hopcraft, and we spend a lot of time talking about the idea of platforms and ecosystems. And where we believe the other place that innovation is heading is to begin to create and modify existing platforms and existing ecosystems. So you can begin to see that already happening. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, how even platforms and ecosystems are being impacted by innovation. And open innovation has a huge opportunity here to really change the way we think about business ecosystems and business platforms. So to what end? If you think about it, we've been innovating products and platforms. But products and platforms basically provide the substrate for an ecosystem. But what ultimately the ecosystem gives you is a customer experience. And this is where we believe ultimately all this is headed, is that everybody wants to buy experiences. They want to be sold experiences, and they want to experience new activities and new experiences. Products will become less important, experiences will become more important. If you think about it, almost every experience is a combination of a number of different products and features and services and models from a number of other players, which is by definition open innovation, that I have to somehow corral and organize a number of different platforms and partners and products and services into a total solution. So if any of you are familiar with Simon Sinek's book, then what we're ultimately getting to is this idea of the why. We're getting to the idea of we need to determine what the customer experience is, and then start defining the solutions that we need, and then build the open innovation models that allow us to achieve that. So ultimately, where open innovation is going is the same place that innovation is going, solving a customer experience challenge. And if you're not sure about that, think about Apple and Android. Basically, they have the same ecosystem partners, but exceptionally different methods around organizing those partners. But the best model I can point you to, and this is going to basically bring me pretty close to conclusion, is autonomous vehicles. Right now, autonomous vehicles are all the rage, but there's lots of different platform partners all having to merge together. Car companies, software companies, mapping companies, sensor companies, governments, they're all having to come together and work together in order to deliver the autonomous vehicle. This is open innovation in its best way, actually, and we can watch it play out in real time and watch the winners and the losers. And the winners are going to be those that innovate around not just the product, but the service and the experiences as well. So this is both a platform and an open experience play, and this is where open innovation is going. So if you think back to what I said, the old sort of closed or even old open innovation is really about developing up a product and promoting it to customers. The new innovation model, and really where open innovation is going to head, and innovation by itself is going to head this way, is what experiences do customers want, what are the relevant platforms and participants that we need, and how do we organize them? This is open innovation. It's finding the technologies and products and services that meet a customer experience and being able to organize them in a way to deliver them effectively. So this is an orchestration model of innovation, and it's a really powerful opportunity right now because the world is moving towards this experience model and platform model innovation. So for those of you who've been listening to me rattle on for the last 45 minutes, the good news is we're right at the close. I've got just one or two slides. The pace of change and the amount of shrinking product cycle are huge drivers for the rate of innovation. And the more you try to do this innovation internally with unfocused teams and with limited bandwidth, the harder it's going to be to stay up with that pace of change. The other thing I can tell you is that your culture has to change. Where the idea comes from, who had it, how it was developed is going to matter much less. And you're going to need to eliminate what we used to call the NIH factor, the not invented here. The goal will be, it doesn't really matter where the idea comes from. It really matters how quickly can we get it to market, a valuable idea to market. And we need to look at third parties as partners and find a way to get to yes much more frequently. And that is also, again, a cultural change. So there's a really significant issue around open innovation and cultural change where these two things are going to collide, and either the culture will win and keep you in a very incremental internal innovation model, or you'll be either able to change your cultural paradigm or overcome it and become much more focused on open innovation. So the other thing I said is, if you go back to Simon Sinek's idea about start with why, we know why. We need to go faster, we need better ideas, we need better solutions for customers, for better experiences. And the how of that is to tap into the power of the crowd, whether that's crowdsourcing or vetted partnerships or something else. And then ultimately the what is the range of kinds of ideas and products and services and business models that we can create by tapping into the power of the crowd. That's the open innovation model. So the question we ask is, open or closed? And the answer is, yeah, you're going to do both. And in fact, eventually, we're not really going to talk about open or closed innovation. We're really going to be talking about innovation, and then the question will become, which tools and methods will we use? Just had a question. We know culture eats strategy for breakfast. How do we change the culture to allow for open innovation in companies that are operating in a closed innovation mindset? So it's a good question, and I tell you what, we're going to park your question, but we will answer it. Because, Tony, I'm going to let you do your wrap-up, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Yep, that's right. So
well, I'm going to...
Go ahead.
No, it's to you.
Oh, terrific. Yeah, so again, everyone, thanks for joining us today for our webinar. We are about to get into Q&A, so do please, submit as many questions as you have, so keep them coming. There were a lot of good questions. As a reminder to everyone, we have been recording this webinar, so we will send out a link to the recording along with the slides so that you can review, all of the great material Jeffrey has been presenting. Also want to encourage you to contact Jeffrey. Here's some contact info on how to contact him. If you'd like to connect with him, get some more information, you can email him at jphillips@ovoinnovation.com or follow him on Twitter at ovoinnovation or visit them on the web. So again, we'll be sending you out these slides so you can get this contact details and connect with Jeffrey and the team at Ovo Innovation. Encourage all of you to do so. Let's dive into some questions here. Of these, Jeffrey, I know there was a couple you'd said you'd mention, we'd get back to during the Q&A. Which of the ones did you want to get to here? I think we were talking a little bit about, how does one control, how broad you go with outsourcing without losing the flow of your innovation process? Thoughts around that?
Right. The question around breadth is really going to be a question around each innovation activity. You should be selecting an open innovation model or type based on the activity. So you might become experienced with 4 or 5 different open innovation tools or techniques, and each one of them will be situational. For one particular instance, you might need tech scouting. For another particular instance, you might want a vetted partnership. So I don't think you need to worry about being broad generally. I think you need to avoid actually breadth and choose the tools that are right for you in the situations. So I would worry less about breadth because over time you may develop that breadth, but really go through some of the mechanisms I showed you to choose the right open innovation tool for the right setting. I want to answer the question
great
about...
insight. Yeah.
I'd like to answer the question around culture and strategy. So we had a question that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. How do we change the culture to allow open innovation in companies that are operating in a closed innovation mindset? Culture is a really difficult question, but the way to get after culture is to ask some of the questions I asked earlier. Do we have enough breadth of ideas and enough volume of ideas? Do we have as smart a people inside the company as we do outside the company and with the same number of perspectives and diversity? And do we have access to the same number of technologies and intellectual property? If they can answer yes to that, then you're going to have a very difficult time changing the mindset to then try to change the culture. Generally speaking, most organizations arrive at open innovation because they recognize they don't have either the breadth of ideas or the breadth of perspectives and heterogeneous relationships or the breadth of technologies they need, and or they recognize that by tapping into the outside world, they can move faster or more efficiently. Until your company accepts that, you're going to have a hard time overcoming the culture because the culture will always say, we can do it more effectively internally. It's not until it arrives at that realization that you're going to be able to overcome the cultural barrier.
And I'm sure we could have an entire webinar on, dealing with culture and handling that shift and trying to get, and that I would guess that in some cases that's really one of the big value propositions of innovation in general is that, it's much more difficult to get a large company to sort of turn its ship in the direction of innovative opportunities, right? I mean, do you have any sort of recommended frameworks or how do they begin that process?
The process of trying to accelerate cultural change?
Yes, exactly. Towards a more, innovative mindset.
Well, 12 years of innovation consulting would tell me that you either need one of two things. You either need a real groundswell of emotion and change within the organization, or you need a burning platform. And a burning platform is so-called because only fools will jump off a platform unless it's burning. So you need some sense of urgency, something that creates urgency. Either your company's moving more slowly and you can quantify that, or your company's losing ground and you can quantify that, but it's got to be quantifiable to some degree, and people have to be able to acknowledge it. Until those things happen, it's exceptionally hard to change culture in a grand way. Now, in a small incremental or team-based approach, what I encourage companies and individuals and teams to do is start from the ground up. Build a team that has the culture that you want. Demonstrate your experience within that team and get a win. And then begin to extend that team's win to other teams so that they buy in, and then you can slowly do it from the ground up. That kind of approach is workable, but it will take years.
Yeah. Great insight there. And so now back to, I think there was an earlier question about smaller companies and their ability to sort of either find existing ecosystems and or to help create them. Thoughts on how, companies in those situations might proceed.
Yeah, and actually one of the best ones I've ever seen was started in not far from where I live. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and one of these was started in Greenville, South Carolina, by a gentleman who was very interested in aligning large companies to small companies to allow what I'll call spin-in and spin-out opportunities. And he created a conference called InnoVenture, which invited Michelin and BMW and others to come in and talk about both technologies that they were going to orphan and were willing to spin out of their organization that smaller companies might want to adopt. And also they would do presentations on technologies and capabilities they needed. So it became a really easy way for large firms and small firms to talk to one another about the needs without necessarily pinning one company down. And then it allowed for, on the side of the conversations, on the side of the conference, the ability to start conversations around how might we begin to work together. Now, that's not something that's going to be replicable everywhere, but it was probably one of the best models I've ever seen for starting that dialogue between larger firms and smaller firms. As a smaller firm, it's even harder unless you have someone step into that model. So what you're looking for, and the best way I would advise to do that, if you go back to the methods we talked about brokers and something we called KOLs. KOL is a key opinion leader. So if you can find someone who is in Malcolm Gladwell's model of the tipping point, a connector or a maven, oftentimes a connector or a maven will have these relationships that can accelerate your introduction. So what I might ask is, for that smaller firm, are there third parties or key opinion leaders or brokers who might be able to help you get introduced in and introduced in it the right way? That's usually the approach that we would argue. That's why it's one of the selections in the Open Innovation Toolkit that we talk about.
Great point. Now, and how are you getting sort of asked to get introduced to in that scenario? Are you looking to sort of identify those in an organization that might have a sort of a strategic initiative that might align with, how you as a potential startup or something with a new sort of innovative product or service or strategy might be able to add value to something that they're already looking to do? How do you kind of go about doing so and looking to find the right person to get introduced to, or are you kind of using your connector to help guide you in that sense?
So it depends on whether you're looking to sell or license a technology to, or get what we would call a spin-in, or you're trying to get something from that larger company, a spin-out. A spin-in this case, where I'm trying, as the smaller company, trying to spin my technology or capability into the larger organization, I'm generally looking at product development, product management type folks, not their technologists, not their R&D folks, because there will be a lot of resistance, and not the IP people, because the IP legal teams, their job is to say no to intellectual property. Mm-hmm. What you want to do is find the people with the need, and the people with the need are going to be the people on the product side who are really understanding customer needs and recognizing that they have gaps, or can become aware of an opportunity to solve a customer need in this case. So what you're looking for are the senior product development folks, senior product management folks for a spin-in, not the technologists, not the IP people.
Got it. And now how about on the sort of spin-out side? I mean, we're digesting another question here. The context of the conference where they come to talk about both orphans and needs. So is it the same? Do you understand the question here, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think that this is back to the conference I was talking about, the Innoventure conference. At the Innoventure conference, the folks that at that conference actually were the right people to talk to. They were representing, and they had been vetted and asked to come to be prepared to talk about both spin-in and spin-out. That conference was meant to eliminate a lot of the mystery around who I should talk to. So they were usually, so the question was, who were they? Generally speaking, the people who were spinning out technologies were either product management who were ending or going to end of life technology, or recognized that the technology just didn't pursue anything that they wanted to pursue in their company, or they were intellectual property folks who had been told, or business development folks who had been told to basically prune the intellectual property portfolio. There's one other unmentioned person here or role here, and that is a business development role. Occasionally, you'll find a role that is meant to be the go-between between these, and you'll find someone whose title is business development, business relationship, and that person may be the appropriate person in both cases. It's rare, though. I would look at, for the spin out, I'd be looking at either the intellectual property team or people who are looking to prune the product portfolio or the IP portfolio.
Right. Well, great. We've reached almost the end of our time, but I did want to, in all of your work and in all of the sort of this topic, is there a question or a piece of insight that you'd want to leave us with that's sort of like your big takeaway on, what should people be looking for as they proceed ahead? What do you think is sort of the one, if there is one big takeaway that you'd want to leave everyone with?
Well, everyone should be doing open innovation. Pretty soon we'll just call it innovation. And everyone needs to understand that it's going to rapidly move from products and technologies into services and business models and channels and experiences. So we're going to move from the more tangible innovations, products and product features and those kinds of things, and it's going to become much more about gathering relationships and channels and services in the goal of delivering an experience. Because that's really where the consumer is moving into, what's my experience? And we need to think beyond just open innovation around the product, but open innovation around the experience.
Oh, that's a great point. Open innovation around an experience, where in many cases where the technology, it just takes a background to creating the experience, because that's really what's important from a consumer standpoint, and even in a business standpoint, it's about the experience that's created by putting these things together, correct?
That's correct. The technology is just a component. The customer wants to acquire an experience, and the technology is a piece of that, but so is the supporting services and the other things, channels and experiences around it.
Fantastic. Well, great. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your time, and thanks everyone for attending today. Again, do please feel free to reach out directly to Jeffrey. We will be sending out a link to the recording along with the deck so that you can review everything here, share it with a colleague or two. I'd recommend doing so. Also, make sure you don't miss the next session, which is coming up on Thursday, May 4th, building a collaborative innovation playbook with Greg Sattel. So please feel free to register for that. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. And again, thank you so much, Jeffrey, for your time today and the great insight. Everyone, please do feel free to reach out to Jeffrey and connect further with him. Thanks again, Jeffrey. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.